Today's video was sponsored by Master Patron Oberon Naga. To get guaranteed requests for videos and other great rewards, go to patreon.com/LilyTheDoof and sign up today. Being a vampire is a curse. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sure, I can turn invisible and summon swarms of bats, but I can also never see my wife again. I know Bruja who've killed their own children in frenzy, or Toreador who've lost themselves to the beauty of the sunrise, or Gangville who can't even recognize themselves in the mirror. There's no debating it. We're damned. The question is it worth it? Is the power, the knowledge of undeath, worth all the shit we have to go through? Let me tell you about the best and worst the kindred have to offer. The ones who were granted ultimate power at the ultimate price. Those who were well and truly burdened with knowledge. These are the Nagaraja, the flesh eaters. The Nagaraja, one of the most feared bloodlines in all of Vampire the Masquerade. And how could you not be scared of these creatures? To even just get by as one of these vampires, you basically have to become a trained serial killer. But you should know by now that even the most monstrous creatures in the world of darkness have at least a glimmer of humanity. And the flesh eaters are no exception. The Nagaraja, much like the remains we talked about, are a bloodline, a vampiric lineage too small to be considered a real clan. While some bloodlines started out in the 13 clans and slowly mutated into their own things, some bloodlines are just anomalies. With the Nagaraja, we have a prime example of the latter. Originally a group of mortal necromancers in the vampire-ruled city of Enoch, these sorcerers came to the quite reasonable conclusion that the easiest way to not die in this city was to become vampires themselves. However, since Cain forbade the third generation from ever embracing, the necromancers had to get creative. So, they found some vampire blood, from which antediluvian is unknown. The White Wolf Wiki says they use Sedite blood, but I haven't been able to find any evidence of this in all my research. And, much like the Tremere would eventually do, magically turned themselves into vampires. Over the next couple of centuries, through a strategic combination of ass-kissing and laying low, the Nagaraja eventually found themselves the guardians of many of Enoch's great treasures and monuments. At which point, the bloodline's true purpose was revealed. They believed Enoch, or as they called it, the Necropolis, would play a vital role in the end of the world, and wanted to use it to bend the apocalypse to their will. The Big 13 were not too happy with some bastard bloodline ruling their city, so the Nagaraja became persona non grata within the city, and were hunted like dogs. While some of the bloodline remained in their holy city, many fled to human societies where cannibalism was more acceptable. In time, the bloodline was driven from the city completely, and in the 1600s, Enoch was destroyed, robbing the Nagaraja of what they felt was their sole purpose. They largely live on the fringes of society nowadays, with only the occasional elder left alive to remember the necropolis. As I said, the Nagaraja wanted control of Enoch because they wanted control of the inevitable Armageddon. Enoch's significance comes from its connection to the Shadowlands and the dead in general. It may surprise you to know that there is actually an entire cult in the game that holds this belief, and that the Nagaraja were only a portion of its membership. The Tal Mahera, or the True Black Hand, no relation to the Black Hand faction of the Sabbat, are a cult that still exists in the modern nights and have frequent interactions with the Shadowlands. I might make a video about the Tal Mahera someday, but that is going to be a very long project. So if you're a patron of mine, please don't add that to my schedule right now. I have a wife and but it's a minority of Nagaraja who actually have any sort of interaction with the Tal Mahera these nights. Most of them are like every other vampire, just trying to live their lives, which is very difficult given the Nagaraja's very specific weakness. If I haven't made it clear, the Nagaraja are called the Flesh Eaters for a reason. While they do gain sustenance from blood alone, not eating flesh will continue to decrease a Nagaraja's dice pool until it leaves them making every roll with a single die. In order to aid them in feeding, the Nagaraja have rows and rows of shark-like teeth, which is very noticeable compared to a vampire's fangs. Their unusual diet, alongside physical abnormalities, makes it especially difficult for Nagaraja to uphold the masquerade. Many of them, at least the ones that survive for more than 10 years, become serial killers, learning how to choose their prey carefully and cover their tracks after feeding. They tend to live on the outskirts of polite society, using the internet to provide for their other necessities, at least before the Second Inquisition rose to power. A true master of the bloodline often has a Dexter-like murder dungeon, hard for outsiders to find, easy for them to clean, and often with refrigerated spaces to store any spare bodies for the future. However, even serial killers need social interaction. As such, the Nagaraja regularly hold murder conventions, or silent conclaves, where they can spend time with like-minded kindred, discussing politics and otherwise just socializing. In order to avoid any unwanted attention from kindred and kind alike, silent conclaves are held at irregular intervals, every time in a different city without any sort of pattern. They often take years to prepare properly, and even the slightest slip-up could prove catastrophic for the bloodline. So, with all of these negatives, what are the benefits to becoming a Nagaraja? Well, as with most vampire clans, it's the disciplines. The Nagaraja's disciplines have been fairly consistent throughout Vampire's various editions. They have Auspex, useful for seeing beyond sight, Dominate, for controlling their proprietary victims, and in 1st edition, the unique discipline of Nihilistics, a power all about infecting the living world with the taint of oblivion. At some point, however, Nihilistics was absorbed as a path of necromancy, and the Nagaraja were just given that instead. In 5th edition, however, the Nagaraja have joined the Hecata, the new clan of death, formed after the disappearance of Augustus Giovanni, making them the only bloodline with no ties to the Cappadocians to join the clan. By default, members of the Hecata bear the disciplines and clan bane of the Giovanni. But by putting points into the Nagaraja lore sheet, a Hecata can gain access to the bloodline's specialized powers, including the ability to forego blood in favor of flesh. So what do you think? If you could be a Nagaraja, would you? Would you accept the isolation, the utter detachment from not only humanity but your fellow vampires, for that knowledge, that sense of higher purpose? Ultimately, I think the Nagaraja are a tale of working with what you have. They're kind of like sewer rats in that regard, huh? Like the old saying goes, like, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away.